Thank you, Chris. How you guys doing? Doing all right? Okay. You might change your tune in just a second. You might change your tune. Because I've got an activity for us we're going to do together, okay? It's going to be really quick, which is going to make it less painful. And we didn't have our greeting time, so this can kind of serve as that. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to find somebody close to you, ideally that you didn't come with or that's not in your family, and we're going to take 30 seconds. That's it. Really easy. I want you to find somebody near you, and I want you to tell them your name and 2 things about you that would help them know who you are. So you only have 30 seconds and 2 things about you that would help them know who you are. 100% participation, Scouts honor. Here we go. Ready, go. Find somebody you haven't seen maybe. Find somebody, tell them your name, 2 things about you. Okay, if the second person hasn't gone yet, here we go. Hurry up. Okay, 10 seconds. 10 seconds. All right. Hey, that was awesome. On a holiday weekend, most of you, I do say most of you, participated. So maybe you met somebody you hadn't met before and learned a little bit about them. We're actually going to come back to that exercise in just a minute. But we're in the middle of a series on the 10 Commandments. In the Old Testament, the manifesto that God gave his children on what it looks like to be a child of God, how to live out who you were created to actually be. The 10 Commandments. It really is kind of the design of life. And we're trying to look at it a little less like a bunch of rules to keep and a little more like a divine instruction, like a gift that they might teach us the way that God created us to live. And today we're looking at command number 4. It is the longest in the Exodus account of the 10 Commandments. It's the one that has the most word count. It's not even close. And it's the only one that includes a command and also a reason why we should follow the command. So there's a little commentary, there's a little motivation why we should live by this command. So we're in Exodus chapter 20. If you have your Bibles with you or your phones, you can pull it out for context, because today we're actually just going to focus in on the 4th commandment together. Exodus chapter 20, beginning in verse 8. It's on the screen here if you'd like. It says this: "Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work. You, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but rested the 7th day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it." So would you say this 4th commandment with me out loud? It's on the screen here. Ready? Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. So what does this mean? I don't know about you, but I don't use the word Sabbath a lot in my normal language. Like if I'm not in this context, sitting in a sanctuary or reading the scripture, the word Sabbath doesn't really come up a lot in conversation. So what does it mean to keep the Sabbath day and to keep it holy? If we look at really just the Hebrew word here, the original language of this word, the word is Shabbat, which simply means that at most simplest form, stop. Stop. That's it. The 4th commandment simply begins with God telling us to stop. To stop. Stop what, you might ask? If you just look at the fourth commandment, it tells us what we are to stop. It says, do not do any work. In other words, stop producing, stop achieving, stop advancing, stop creating, stop sustaining, stop figuring it all out and worrying about the stuff you can't figure out. Stop scheming and rest. Rest. Feels pretty good to be told to rest, doesn't it? Wait, this is a commandment? This is like commanding somebody to eat cheesecake or to have a belly laugh or to go vacation on the beach, right? You guys act like you're not tired. Come on. God's commanding us to rest. Yet when we read this, we realize how negligent we are when it comes to truly resting. How easy it is to forget the importance of slowing down and disconnecting and stopping all the production, right? We're so wound tight with this desire to accumulate, this desire to achieve, and it just drives us forward right through any stop signs. But today, I came to tell you good news. God's commanding you to stop. This week, I asked my 8-year-old, I asked him what he felt when somebody tells him to stop. So I didn't tell him what he did or what he thought it meant. I just asked an 8-year-old, I said, what do you feel when somebody tells you to stop? After all, it's kind of hard to tell somebody to stop in like a loving, kind way. Like, oh, you should stop. Like, stop signs are bright red, and usually when you hear stop, you hear stop, right? But I didn't say any of that to him. I just said, how do you feel when somebody tells you to stop? And his answer was so good. He says, when somebody tells me to stop, I'm afraid. I'm afraid. And what he was getting at is anytime somebody tells you to stop, it's most likely because there's something dangerous on the other side. That there is incoming danger. That there is maybe a threat. And so when I asked him his feelings when he's told to stop, the first feeling he thought of was fear. Because the command to stop is often a sign that something dangerous is imminent. And maybe that's why command number 4 is given to an overworked, overstimulated, overaccumulated, overstressed group of Jesus followers in Sapulpa, Oklahoma. Shabbat. Stop. Rest. Because if you don't, danger is looming. Danger is lurking for your soul. When we talked to one another about ourselves just a minute ago, how many of you, would you raise your hand? How many of you, when you told that other person 2 things about yourself, how many of you mentioned what you do for work or what you do at school or some accomplishment you've earned? So what you do as a profession, work, school, or some accomplishment you've earned. If that was you in one of your 2 things, would you raise your hand? Anybody? Anybody? 2, 3, 4. Okay, 5. I thought I would see a few more hands, because how often when we're telling somebody about ourselves do we focus on what it is that we do? How often is the way we describe ourselves based on the things we've accomplished and achieved? And isn't it interesting that in defining ourselves to one another, usually what stands out most is what we've done or what we currently do. And the challenge of the 4th commandment this morning is really just to consider what makes you valuable when you're at rest. What makes you you when you're not doing anything? Because Sabbath is really the act of intentionally doing less than you can. Isn't that good? Sabbath is the act of intentionally doing less than you can. Because did you know, because I can is a terrible reason to do anything. Yet so often we push ourselves to the very limit of our capability. And because we can, we do it. But as Bishop Will Willimon in the United Methodist Church reminds us, that Sabbath is a publicly enacted sign of our trust that God keeps the world, therefore we don't have to. That's what we do when we Sabbath. We make this public declaration that God's got it, so I don't have to figure it all out. And I love how Exodus highlights that this Sabbath rest is actually communal. Verse 10 says, "But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work." It could stop there, but it doesn't. It says you, your son and your daughter, your male and female slave, your livestock, and even the alien resident in your towns. Because here's the thing, Sabbath rest is only accomplished in the context of community. If I don't rest, you can't either. If I don't do my part, others are dragged into my overfunctioning. I think about this often because of our culture's infatuation with shopping on Black Friday, right? And my heart used to break. I'm not usually weird about like legalistic things like that, but my heart used to break because Black Friday kind of kept easing into Thanksgiving. Did you notice that trend? Like it started at 4 a.m. on Black Friday, but then after a few years, stores were opening at like 5 or 6 p.m. on Thanksgiving. Which means because I want to go and have the thrill of shopping and accumulating and buying all of this stuff, somebody else has to go to work on Thanksgiving because I couldn't wait 8 hours to go shopping. And that's kind of a silly illustration, but the concept is true. If none of us take seriously the command to rest, then we create a culture in which it is almost impossible to slow down and rest. So today the command is to stop, to rest. But it has another component. 2 components here, because Sabbath is much more than a day off from work. When you think about Sabbath, maybe you think to yourself, that means I'm not clocking in today. That means I'm not opening my work email. That means I'm giving myself a day off from the task list at my job. But really, that is not what Sabbath rest fully entails. In fact, there is Eugene Peterson, who was a pastor for many, many years, and he actually wrote the Message translation. He says that really, if you consider Sabbath just to be a day off from work, then he called that a bastard Sabbath because it's illegitimate in really its meaning and its context of what the fullness of Sabbath should be. It's rest, but it's missing the second component. Just read the commandment again with me. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Rest is only half the equation. The other half is setting apart a whole day, every single week, and giving that day to the Lord. To stop on one hand, but to sanctify, to set apart, to make the day holy, to make it unlike the other 6 days. Can I just ask you, and I don't ask you because I have this figured out, but because I'm feeling a bit guilty. Does your Sabbath look any different than the other 6 days? And you're not just resting because the other 6 days wore you out, but you're pursuing God and His glory. This is why Christians have traditionally worshiped on what we call the Lord's Day. It's more than a weekly pick-me-up where pastor gives you some TED Talk and tries to encourage your soul. It's more than just meeting friends. It's this commitment. It's this sign to the world that today belongs to the Lord. So when we gather together like this each week, we make this public statement to ourselves and one another that God's glory is worthy of our time. It's just like if my wife's birthday is coming, I'm going to give her that full day. I'm going to honor her that full day. Maybe you have a close friend or a child, and when their birthday comes on the calendar, what do? You set aside that day to honor, to glorify, to thrill, to delight with that person. I wonder if Sabbath is kind of a similar concept. This day belongs to the Lord. And here's the cool thing. When we make a point to sanctify a day, God makes a point to honor it. Jewish theologian Abraham Heschel has called the Sabbath day a breakthrough of eternity in time. And here's what I think he means. That when we rest on the Sabbath, we worship on the Sabbath, we get a feeling, we get the sense of what our souls will experience for all eternity. On the Sabbath, eternity breaks into our calendar, breaks into our time constraints, and we experience the fullness of all eternity right here and right now. And it's not just about church attendance. It's about honoring God with the schedule of the whole day. It's about honoring God with our words and our actions, our attitudes. It's about taking a day where we really shape our spending habits, what we consume, what we watch in the media, on our phones, how we treat one another. What if we had a day every week where we filtered every activity we did through this simple evaluation? Is this activity rest, or is this activity worship? There's an author, John Mark Comer, used to pastor a church in Portland. He wrote a beautiful book on Sabbath and rest. It's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And he says that the value of his family's Sabbath day greatly increased when his family committed to run every activity they did for the day through this filter. Is this activity rest or is it worship? And he said, if it wasn't, there are 6 other days for that activity. You don't have to do it on the Sabbath. You can stop and sanctify one day per week. And you might be saying, man, this sounds a little bit legalistic, but it doesn't have to be. Did you forget that rest is a gift? Rest is a gift God's trying to give us. Rest should be joyful, refreshing, fill our emotional tanks. Worship should be life-giving, soul-nourishing work. So play some golf, catch a fish, cook a meal, make love, scrapbook, sew, read a psalm, call a friend, eat to your heart's content, right? Enjoy and delight in one day a week to stop and sanctify. I wonder what it would look like if all of us just tried this once. I'm not talking about a long-term commitment. I'm saying, what if you picked one day in the next couple weeks and said, I'm going to try that for one day. Every activity, either rest or worship. Shut the phone off. Sleep in. Grab a good book and a hammock. Play some board games with your family. Pray together. Make some cookies. Journal. Run everything through this filter. If it doesn't fit, do it the next day. Skip it for a day. And you're looking at me, I can tell you're saying, Pastor Brady, I can't afford to do this. There's so much laundry, right? If you've got 3 boys like we do, there is always laundry. There's so much yard work this time of the year. The grass is growing so fast. There's so much to catch up on at work. There's so much I would miss with my friends or on social media. There's so many people that need my help. There's so many good reasons to stay engaged in the world. But did you notice when we read this, who modeled this commandment for us? Verse 11, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, but rested the 7th day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath and consecrated it. Why do you think God rested on the 7th day? You think he was just really tired? All that creating just wore him out. He didn't have any choice. He just had to. Maybe he just couldn't push through, right? His emotional tank, his energy was just gone. He just couldn't push through. His body ached. Couldn't keep his eyes open. Do you think he did it just so he could be productive in the next 6 days? He knew he had another busy 6 days coming, and so the reason he took time off for one day and rested was so that he'd be ready for that next week. I don't think so. I don't think any of those reasons are why God rested. I think God looked at what he created and the bounty of all creation, and it was so good that he had to stop and delight in his creation. It was so good that he had to take a moment to cherish it. It was such a good gift that he had to pause and reflect on that goodness. See, the Sabbath day should be the same for us. We don't take the Sabbath for utilitarian reasons so that we can be more productive in the other 6 days. We Sabbath because God's gift to us is to rest and enjoy the beauty and the glory of his goodness. So what if we followed God's example and delighted in his goodness for a day? That's the Sabbath command, right? That's the Sabbath challenge. As we close the service, the band is coming, and I've invited Pastor Anthony also to come. We're going to play a song for you, a song that talks about the goodness and the provision of God. And you're not going to know the song. You don't need to even worry about singing along. But as we sing, I want you to think about how you might lean into this command of Sabbath. As we sing, I want you to take inventory of your life, of the goodness around you that you might focus on, and consider God's delight and join him in that delight. As we sing, maybe you could convince yourself that you can afford to Sabbath. You can pull it off. You can do it. So, before we sing this song, I felt like the Lord wanted us to maybe spend a moment reciting together the 23rd Psalm, which should put our hearts at ease, knowing that we can Sabbath. And so I'd like you to read this out loud as Pastor Anthony leads us in this. It's on the screen behind you, Anthony. The 23rd Psalm in its entirety. Let's read it out loud together.
The Lord is my shepherd. He gives me everything I need. He lets me lie down in fields of green grass. He leads me beside quiet waters. He gives me new strength. He guides me in the right paths for the honor of his name. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid. You are with me. Your shepherd's rod and staff comfort me. You prepare a feast for me right in front of my enemies. You pour oil on my head. My cup runs over. I am sure that your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever.